Modern-day Mongolia is a mere shadow of the empire once ruled by infamous leaders like Genghis Khan and his grandson Kublai Khan. It is one of the most sparsely populated nations in the world. In a country more than twice the size of Texas, nearly half of its inhabitants live in the capital of Ulaanbaatar. Most Mongolians, however, currently live inside China's borders. Mongolia feels like such a distant land from America. So when I read of Jesus' parting words found in Acts 1:8, that we must take the gospel to the ends of the earth, this is one of the places that comes to my mind. And with over 90% of the population either Buddhist or non-religious, the life-saving message of the gospel is so desperately needed here. Hi, my name is Joseph Williams and I'm with Feed the Hunger, and I'm sharing with you inside because it's just too cold and windy outside. But it is in this unique and exotic setting here in Mongolia that I want to share with you from 2 chapters in the Gospel of Matthew and give you something further to study. You know, a lot of Christians get caught up in trying to predict when the second coming of Christ will take place. This speculation has gone on since Jesus first left in general and has been going on for decades here in America in particular. Believers like to point to the details in the early verses of Matthew 24 as proof of His soon return. You know the passage, the wars, the famines, earthquakes, persecution, and so on. We see that and we get overwhelmed and we say, surely the Lord is coming back today. But the reality is in verse 14, He makes it clear what is the most important sign. Here's what the verse says. And the gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. Well, what is Jesus saying here? The original Greek word for nation is actually ethne, which we get the word ethnic. Sound familiar? Ethnic groups are more specific than nations, and they have common traits such as history, language, beliefs, and identity. For example, the nation of Mongolia has 29 distinct people groups, one nation with many people groups. And most of these people groups are considered unreached with the gospel. Christian missiologists, those that study all of these ethnic groups of the world, have identified thousands of them that are labeled unreached. What does this mean? This means that they do not have enough followers of Christ to effectively reach their own people with the gospel. Make sense? These missiologists have found the threshold for effectiveness in making disciples occurs when more than 2% of the population is Christian. Now, a large percentage of unreached people groups are also considered unengaged. What does that mean? Unengaged means that there are not only no known believers, but no one is trying to reach them. This is a people group that has no witness and no plans for a witness. There are no missionaries, there's no church, there are no believers, and no plans to reach them. The vast majority of both unreached and unengaged people groups are located in what is known as the 1040 window. This is an area from 10 degrees to 40 degrees latitude north of the equator. It stretches from North Africa across the Middle East and through much of Asia. It contains the major religious strongholds of Islam, Hinduism, and Buddhism, and also holds most of the world's poor. So this sounds like a pretty strategic window, wouldn't you agree? Now, what makes this task of completing the Great Commission more challenging for us Christians from the Western world is that we have been taught to learn academically from books. In reality, 2/3 of the world, most of the world, learns orally through such means as storytelling. So we must adapt to the learning methods of the people we are trying to reach if we expect to be effective. Revelation 7:9 tells us that one day every nation, tribe, people, and language will be gathered around God's throne. What a day that is to look forward to. But for that to happen, followers of Christ have operated under the belief that all the people groups need to have a viable witness at the same point in time before Christ returns. Is this accurate, or is it cumulative through time? For example, if a group was once reached but is now considered unreached, what does God consider them? Well, the reality is in my mind that no one really knows God's definition of the fulfillment of Matthew 24:14. And so, we keep pressing on to share the gospel to the ends of the earth. It's that simple. We just need to keep telling people, especially those who are unreached and unengaged. But what does all of this mean on a practical level for you and me as believers? My message for you from here in Mongolia is found in Jesus' instructions in Matthew 25. If the first half of Matthew 24 lays out a blueprint for what is to take place before the Messiah comes again, then the three parables in chapter 25 spell out what we should be doing with our lives in the meantime. The first parable is about 10 unmarried bridesmaids, half of whom were ready to fulfill their role and half who were not. In the marriage custom of the day, which is of course important for us to understand so that we can interpret this passage correctly, they needed to always be ready with lamps well supplied with oil to help the bride meet up with the bridegroom. In the parable, there was nothing that the 5 who weren't ready could do once the bridegroom showed up. Likewise, we need to be ready for the Lord's delayed second coming. He could return at any time for His bride, the church. So, will He find us faithful and getting people ready for His return? Or will we squander this incredible opportunity called life to serve Him and have deep regrets upon His return? We alone will each have to answer for ourselves. The second parable is one that most of us are familiar with and is known as the parable of the talents. This is the story of 3 servants who are called upon by their master to invest wisely with his resources. He gives each one talents that he expects to be used and produce great results. 2 servants are fruitful and 1 is not. Likewise, God asks us to wisely steward the time, the talents, and the treasure that He has given each of us. The question is, will we be wise and work hard, or will we delay or even ignore our call as believers and instead live for ourselves? Though not quite a parable, the final passage in chapter 25 uses the imagery of people as sheep and goats. The sheep belong to the shepherd and the goats do not. The Psalms speak of the Lord as our shepherd and believers as the sheep of His pasture. God expects His sheep to do His bidding. One day He will judge all of us for our actions, as we've said. We alone will answer for ourselves. This passage specifically mentions 6 practical actions we are called to take in this life if we truly belong to Him. They are feed the hungry, give water to the thirsty, help the homeless, provide clothes for the naked, minister to the sick, and visit the prisoner. So are we a believer or unbeliever? A child of God or a pretender? If our faith can't be demonstrated in these practical expressions of love just been listed, how can we prove that we belong to the shepherd? We need to take the meaning of all three of these crucial messages together to understand our goal for this life. As Jesus directed us, we should be spiritually prepared for His return, good stewards with what He has given us to do, and willing to help those in need. With the state of our country and world today, it's tempting to be pessimistic and only long for the Lord's return, to get caught up in the speculation of when and point to this sign and that sign. But you know what? We have work to do. So let me close by encouraging you to surrender your life each day to the Father's will. We shouldn't be so caught up in trying to figure out when He will return that we neglect what we should be doing now. That is what we have to answer for. What are we doing now? And we know He wants all of us to be involved in spreading the gospel. We are all supposed to be Great Commission-minded Christians. Whether or not we ever leave our hometown, there are ways for all of us to be globally minded, beyond going, such as with our prayers and with our resources. So ask the Lord, get on your knees genuinely and humbly and ask Him how He wants to use your life for His glory, from your street corner to around the world. There are so many ways to be a part of His master plan. So just be available and obedient to what He shows you to do. As you help fulfill the Great Commission, look for those practical ways that you can minister to people on a daily basis. I promise you, those opportunities are there every single day. So be wise stewards of the abilities and resources that God has given you. And then, one day, when you meet the Savior face to face, you will hear Him say what is recorded in Matthew 25. Well done, good and faithful servant. Come and share your Master's happiness.